Like the Prime Minister and other members of the People's Coalition government, I have been receiving your good wishes and warm welcome over the last few weeks, since Christmas Eve, when we were elected, then sworn in by His Excellency the President. Some may be tired of seeing the welcome and positive response People's Coalition government has been receiving, but to me, they are an expression of hope and thanksgiving for the change after 16 long years of fear and dictatorship. On Saturday, 21st January, the Secretary General of the FijiFirst Party, Mr. Khaiyum, held a press conference after a meeting of the opposition caucus. He was flanked by some of the 26 FijiFirst MPs and spoke at length for over an hour on various matters. This government will continue to respect the Constitution and follow the rule of law. It is unfortunate that Mr. Khaiyum is not the shadow Attorney General, and perhaps Honorable Aiyaz Sayed-Khaiyum should have stepped forward rather than being forced to flank a non-MP who lost his parliamentary seat, having breached the law in attending a meeting of the Constitutional Officers Commission while being an MP and a party official of the FijiFirst Party. No one has commented on the fact that former Prime Minister and current leader of the opposition made a gaffe in saying Mr. Khaiyum would remain on the COC and lead FFP's efforts outside Parliament, when later Khaiyum had to resign to be able to remain a General Secretary of the FijiFirst Party. It is unfortunate that the FijiFirst have refused the hands of friendship offered across the floor of Parliament by the Honorable Prime Minister, and instead choose to go down the road of competitive relationship and thus not unite the nation. On Saturday, Mr. Khaiyum attempted to lecture the nation on the rule of law and the 2013 Constitution. I encouraged Mr. Khaiyum to file a constitutional redress application to prove his accusation that the People's Coalition government had continuously breached the 2013 Constitution since coming into power. It is all very well to spout political rhetoric and point fingers, but in my view, Mr. Khaiyum's accusations holds no water. Mr. Khaiyum is playing political games, exaggerating half-truths to mislead the public and attempt to pressure the Commander RFMF to invoke his powers under Section 131 of the 2013 Constitution. Mr. Khaiyum made baseless allegations based on unnamed sources, which is no better than gossip. This fear-mongering was designed to disempower our citizens, weaken investor confidence, incite instability, and create anxiety. I remind Mr. Khaiyum that government belongs to the people. It's not the property of the two-man government that ruled by fear since 2006. Under the 2013 Constitution, the people decide their government. It is the people's choice, and they choose the People's Coalition government. FijiFirst gained only 42% of the vote in the recent election, not enough to govern outright, while 58% of voters choose the opposition parties. Mr. Khaiyum mentioned that the meeting of the FFP caucus on Saturday discussed their strategy. However, we are of the view that the FFP strategy appears to be one of intimidation, destabilization, and unsubstantiated allegations. I confirm my oath sworn on the 24th of December 2022 that I will continue to uphold the 2013 Constitution at all times, legally advise government, the PM, and Cabinet accordingly. The amendment of the Constitution is clear. I am aware of the requirements for amendment contained in Section 160 of the Constitution. It is now almost 10 years since the Constitution was promulgated by decree, so it makes sense that a review should take place and the provisions for its amendment followed to improve it. It appears Mr. Khaiyum complained about the possible amendment that is the prerogative as the General Secretary of the opposition party to do so. But I will swiftly correct any lies or half-truth in his attempt to cause fear, anxiety, and instability in the nation. In terms of the use of the word fundamental, it is worth noting that there are a number of fundamental breaches of the Constitution under the FFP regime, which Mr. Khaiyum chose to conveniently forget while making baseless allegations against the coalition government. There is a saying that those in glass house should not throw stones. This is not to justify any breaches of any future governments or the coalition government, but I advise him to have a sense of proportion in his criticism of government. Regarding the Constitutional Officers Commission, Mr. Khaiyum claims the coalition unlawfully removed the members of the Constitutional Officers Commission. The fact is the commissioners were asked to resign, they did, and new ones were appointed. No one needs legal authority to ask someone to do something voluntarily. Those seats on the COC are not the property of the FijiFirst or Mr. Khaiyum, and no law was broken. On the separation of powers, Mr. Khaiyum tries to lecture the nation on the doctrine of the separation of powers. It is worth noting that our Constitution mandates the Chief Justice to act as head of state in the absence of the President for any reason. It's strict law that the Executive or the PM and the Cabinet are elected from our House of Representatives or Parliament, and in effect have a majority vote to decide the legislation enacted by Parliament. Further, the President is elected from Parliament. He or she would be nominated by the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Oppositions, and then the nominee with a majority of votes is elected as the President and swear his oath before the Chief Justice. In similar manner, constitutional officers are appointed by the President on the advice of the Constitutional Officers Commission, the majority of whose members are nominated by the Prime Minister. The Chief Justice is appointed by the President on the advice of the Judicial Services Commission, which includes the Attorney General. So already, our system of government based loosely on the Westminster system does not have the pure separation of powers as envisaged, for example, in the Constitution of the United States of America. I wish to advise Mr. Khaiyum that government is well aware of his doctrine and will respect it. If he is aware of any breaches, then Mr. Khaiyum needs to take it to court. On the allegations that the People's Coalition government is defraying religious freedom, Mr. Khaiyum is blind to the practice that under the FijiFirst, often prayers were offered in government events and meetings. While the Constitution protects religious freedom, it does not tell us how and when to pray. On the term of Fijian as common name, again Mr. Khaiyum is playing with half-truths to mislead the people when it comes to his petty complaints that the Ministry of Information Facebook page is now called Fiji Government. Frankly, there is nothing grammatically incorrect about that. The fact is, no law was broken by the renaming. The Constitution does not say everything related to the government must be called Fijian. Neither does it require all officials to call citizens Fijian when they speak. Further, the Constitution enshrines freedom of speech. We are the Republic of Fiji, not the Republic of Fijians constitutionally. Fiji is home to all Fijians. In China, the official government website is the State Council People's Republic of China. In the USA, it is the USA government, US government. In Australia and Britain, it is the Australian government and the British government. There is no English government, as the former AG claims. The fact is, there are no right or wrong way to describe a title or name a government Facebook page or website. It is the prerogative of government. In the transition from a FFP to the coalition government, a decision has been made to call government page Fiji Government. Regarding the use of vernacular languages in Parliament, Mr. Khaiyum was very agitated in his complaint on the announcement by the Prime Minister that Hindi and Hospakaviti can be used in Parliament. He spoke at length about this, over 500 words in fact. After 16 years of watching Mr. Khaiyum, it is striking that some things never change. He pretends not to know the truth of facts and instead puts forward his own version of the facts. Well, the PM did say this, and it's a priority to resurrect and recognize the status of mother language of our two communities. What is wrong with it? The fact is, the ruling party has the majority of votes in Parliament. As for FijiFirst, did from 2014 to 2018, and they decided to amend the standing orders because they had the numbers. And they decided to amend so many laws, fast-track under Standing Order 51 without consulting the people. That is a fact. While we do have the doctrine of separation of powers, our executive governments since 1970 have been elected through the legislature. It is therefore clear that the Prime Minister commands the majority of votes in Parliament. If the Prime Minister has the mandate to change the language spoken in Parliament, to recognize the fact that the majority of our people have their own mother language, which is not English, and do not speak English daily, then they have the right to understand what is being said in Parliament. While the legal process will take place in Parliament with the Standing Orders Committee, we can understand that the government has the mandate to make certain changes. Mr. Khaiyum still thinks he is in control. His allegation that the PM's view or intention is unconstitutional is plainly crying wolf, and Mr. Khaiyum should stop with his lies and exaggerations. On the Constitutional Officer's Independent Commission, it is tried fact that commissioners must have the confidence of the executive. Since 2006, when commissioners, CEOs, and permanent secretaries, various civil servants, police commissioners, treasury boards, and government company boards were removed wholesale, the boards have been totally lopsided. On the Fiji National Provident Fund board, workers' representatives were removed, and the fund became a piggy bank for the FijiFirst. Yet the voice of the workers was totally removed and silenced as to how their funds are administered and invested. We can talk about the fairness. The 1970 and 1997 constitutions allowed the leader of the opposition to also nominate members of the independent commissions. However, since 2006 and under the 2013 Constitution, only the FFP nominees are recommended by the Constitutional Officers Commission to the President. That is the fact of the matter. Since 2006, almost all boards and commissions were the cronies of Mr. Khaiyum. I will wait on Mr. Khaiyum to provide evidence of his claims and urge him to file constitutional redress rather than make press conferences. On the issue of Commissioner of Police, Mr. Khaiyum complains that the Minister of Home Affairs called on the Commissioner of Police to resign, as he had no confidence in him. As an elected official, the Cabinet Minister assigned with ministerial responsibility for the Police Act, that is the prerogative of the Minister. It is common sense that the Minister must have confidence in the officials who implement the laws in his ministerial assignment. However, unlike FFP, which removed the number of police commissioners, including Commissioner Grunwald and other senior officials like the Solicitor General and government institution arbitrarily, the Minister of Home Affairs have referred the matter to the right body, the Constitutional Officers Commission. That is all I will say on the matter which is now before the COC. On the role of the Public Service Commission, Mr. Khaiyum tried to say that PM should not consult the Public Service Commission when it comes to the appointment for ambassadors. Unlike the FijiFirst government, where only one man made the decision, the coalition government is consultative, and it is the PM's prerogative to consult the PSC as the expert body established to oversee the public service. Mr. Khaiyum should stop with the allegations that what the Prime Minister or the People's Coalition government is doing is in breach of the Constitution. He should leave the governing to the elected government and focus on his role as General Secretary. He should let the elected opposition MPs do their job. Regarding the complaints before the COC, Mr. Khaiyum waded into a complaint that is now before the COC. As it is before the OC, I will only caution Mr. Khaiyum, as a former member of the COC, to let the COC do its job. Unlike the FijiFirst government, the People's Coalition government is following due process and not sending armed personnel to escort and remove property appointed officials from their office, which was a hallmark of their style of leadership over the last 16 years. If constitutional redress applications are to be filed, Mr. Khaiyum is at liberty to do so. Until then, I urge him to leave the COC to perform its role, given that he abandoned it in his failure to understand the laws he forced on the people of Fiji. On my meeting with the Chief Justice, it is unfortunate that Mr. Khaiyum had made various wild allegations about my meeting with the Chief Justice. I will not elaborate on the meeting, given it was a confidential, and will not comment further on the gossip being peddled by Mr. Khaiyum to destabilize the government and incite instability. Regarding air terminal services, as usual, Mr. Khaiyum has again made wild allegations. It is well known that Mr. Khaiyum controlled the majority of statutory bodies and government companies through their boards over the last 16 years, and had actively issued instructions to remove and appointed board members willy-nilly. The Minister for Tourism had issued a public statement on this matter. The fact is, government owns majority shares in ATS and appoints the board. Mr. Khaiyum refused to recognize the ATS board members appointed by the employees who also own shares in ATS. The fact is, government sets the policy for its companies, for the company it owns, through the boards. It is for the board to implement that policy, just as they did through the last 16 years. The Minister will work within the legal framework on the issue of re-employment. We recognize the critical role of ATS and Fiji Airways. Mr. Khaiyum should cease his baseless allegation trying to incite instability in these entities. On the issue of the audit of capital gains tax exemptions, this is the prerogative of the elected government through the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Khaiyum, please let government do its job. Tomorrow is just 1 month since we were sworn in as the new government. On the matter of statutory boards, ministers have powers to appoint and remove certain boards, just as he did with the Housing Authority board recently. He asked them to resign before the end of their term, and they did, and he appointed a new board. Mr. Khaiyum also raised the issue of the new chair of the Fiji Broadcasting Corporation holding a press conference. He seems to have particular animosity on this issue. Other board chairs have had press conferences, and there is nothing wrong with it. I wish to clarify that the FBC chairman had resigned from the People's Alliance before his appointment. Regarding the appointment of acting permanent secretaries, there is no requirement for advertisement of an acting appointment. This is a basic employment practice. On any policy matter, the People's Coalition government will carry out extensive consultations before cabinet approval is sought for the drafting of legislation, which will then again undergo consultation, and ultimately the financial implications will be considered, whether provision can be made in the budget. This includes the Land Claims Tribunal. Regarding the redeployment of funds within the 2022-23 budget, Mr. Khaiyum waded again into a government prerogative of the People's Coalition government. What is clear from Mr. Khaiyum's press conference is contempt for everyone who has a view contrary to his own. For the last 16 years, Mr. Khaiyum professes to be the only person who knows anything about governing this country. The people of Fiji are the best judges of that. On the subject of scholarships, I urge Mr. Khaiyum to wait for the process and design of the new system of tertiary scholarships before shooting off with the baseless accusations. On the issue of Laudala Island Hangar construction, this has been explained by the Deputy Prime Minister, Manoa Kamkamida. So I will say no more about that. About retirement age, Mr. Khaiyum does not have the full facts. The matter was decided by Cabinet at its meeting last week. Thereafter, the circular was issued and the regulations amended and published. It is clear that having lost the election, the FijiFirst strategy is to create uncertainty, instability, and to undermine the rule of law and democracy, and the will of the people expressed in the 2022 general election. To conclude, I want to reiterate the commitment of the People's Coalition government to abide by the rule of law and uphold the Constitution of the Republic of Fiji.